do better. I think one of the big differences between extroverts and introverts is simply how much time and space we have and we give ourselves to practice. Because like anything that's skills based, the first time you play soccer, the first time you play cricket, the first time you go and lift weights, you're not great at it. You got to practice it. You got to learn how to do it. And communication is exactly the same way.
What would you consider the component skills of communication if you were to bucket them together?
Okay, so there's a couple of them. And we should talk about what a super communicator is, because I think that'll help people kind of visualize this in their head. So let me ask you a question, which is, let's imagine you're having like a bad day, right? Like just terrible day. You come home after work, you're like, and you want to call someone because you know calling this person will make you feel better. Like you'll just like it. Do you know who you would call? Like, does that person pop into your mind?
Yeah, probably either Luke, my tour manager, or George, who is a friend and has been on the show 10 times.
Okay. So Luke and George are, for you, super communicators. And you are, I guarantee you, a super communicator back to them, right? You do it without even thinking about it. You just know how to you know how to ask the right question. You know how to show that you're listening. You know how to show that you care. You know how to, each of those things that you're doing with those two guys are skills. And you might not recognize them as skills right now because they just feel so natural to you, but they are skills. And once we identify them as skills, they become fungible. You can talk to a stranger the same way you talk to Luke. And if you do, it'll have the same impact that it has on Luke, which is that it feels like you're the most wonderful person on earth. Okay, so what are those skills? So one of the things that we know about super communicators, and this is the first skill, is that, and as I mentioned, we're all super communicators one time or another, but consistent super communicators, people who can connect with almost anyone, is that they tend to ask more questions, like 10 to 20 times as many questions as the average person. And some of those questions we don't even register as questions, or things like, oh, what'd you make of that? Or like, oh, did you like that restaurant? Like little things that just invite us into a conversation. But some of the questions are what are known within psychology as deep questions. And a deep question is something that asks us about our values or beliefs or our experiences. And that can sound a little bit intimidating, but it's like as simple as like if you meet someone who's a doctor, instead of saying, oh, what hospital do you work at? Saying, oh, what made you decide to go to medical school? Right? It's as easy to ask the second question as the first, but the second question like invites them to talk about who they are. It's a deep question. It doesn't appear like a deep question, but it allows you to have a real conversation. So this is the first skill. Super communicators ask a lot more questions, and they ask deep questions. They ask about, instead of asking about the facts of someone's life, they ask how they feel about their life.
It's interesting thinking about the two guys that I mentioned, because they would both a lot of the time drop into that. And I think there's a sense of being seen when somebody asks you a question about how did that make you feel? Because at no point are they denying the fact that you felt that way or should have felt that way, that it feels like a judgment-free zone.
Totally. And the thing I love about that too, and I think that that's a really smart comment, because what it also recognizes is when I ask you about your personal experiences, I'm asking you about something that you are an expert on. And so let's say we're having a political debate and we disagree with each other, and I've got all my facts in my pocket and you've got all your facts in your pocket. But if I ask you, like, how did you feel on election day? Like when you saw the results come in, how did you feel? You're the expert in how you feel. I can't be like, oh, you didn't feel that way. You actually felt this way, right? Like, and then when you ask me how I felt, I'm the expert in what I feel. And so instead of us trying to out-expert each other and out-duel each other, we're both coming with these authentic experiences that we have. And it allows us to find all the things we have in common. Because if you voted for the person I didn't vote for and vice versa, my guess is actually that was the smallest part of that week, right? Was casting that ballot. There was also like waking up the morning after, there's taking your kids to school, there's, talking to friends about the election. Those are all things that we have in common. And finding that commonality really helps us also talk about what we don't have in common, which is really powerful.
Okay, next skill.
Okay, so first one is asking deep questions. Second skill is that Once we ask those questions, we often think that it's just our job to listen to people. And that's a little bit of a misunderstanding of what listening is. So what's interesting is that most of the time when we think about listening, what we think about is we think about remaining silent, right? 2 ears, 1 mouth, remaining silent, listening to what you're saying. Maybe we'll nod our head. Maybe we'll like look you in the eyes and say like, that's interesting. That's not listening. That's the first condition of listening, but you need more to actually be a good listener. And in part, it's because particularly when we're talking about something that's really sensitive or really important or really controversial or something we feel conflict over, that we disagree with each other, there's always a sneaking suspicion in the back of our heads that you are not actually listening to me. You're just waiting your turn to speak. So what do I do to overcome that suspicion? Well, there's actually this technique. Let me give you the answer. The answer is that you have to prove that you're listening. You have to prove to the person you're paying attention. And there's actually this technique that they teach at like Harvard and Stanford and all these other fancy schools that's called looping for understanding. And this is what it is. There's 3 parts to this. When you're talking to someone and you get to that point in the conversation where like things are getting real, step 1 is you should ask a question, right? Preferably a deep question. Try and use that, ask someone, how do you feel about that? What does that mean to you? Why did you decide to do X? And then listen to what they're saying in response. And when they're done answering the question, repeat back in your own words what you heard them say. Now, the key here is it cannot be mimicry, right? This is what bad salespeople do. They just say back what you just said to them or the last thing that you said. What it has to be is you're trying to prove to them that you're actually processing this. So it has to be something like, what I hear you saying is this. And that reminds me of something you said last week because I think they're connected, right? You're proving to them that you're thinking about what they said. And most of us do these first 2 steps intuitively, right? This is just like, we kind of learn this in school. It's step 3 that I always forget, because once you've said to them, here's what I heard you say. Am I getting this right? Or you say, did I hear you correctly? You ask if you got it right. Because what you're really doing in that moment is you're asking for permission to acknowledge that you were listening. And when you acknowledge that I was listening, I become many, many times more likely to listen to you in return. This is basic social reciprocity.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the second skill, is prove you are listening. Ask deep questions, prove you are listening through a technique like looping for understanding, or maybe just asking follow-up questions, or maybe saying, oh man, that sounds so hard. I kind of know what that's like. I've been through something myself. Prove you're listening. So third, sorry, go ahead.
No, just it makes an awful lot of sense that it can, bad conversations can feel like a game of tennis where everybody is just waiting their turn. Oh, the ball's coming over the net, it's coming over, it's going to bounce, and then it's my turn to hit it.
Yeah, and that's not fun, right? Like it's not like, and by the way, if you look at transcripts of great conversations, what you see is that they're a total mess. Like if you have a transcript and everyone's being really eloquent, they're saying things in like these really like practiced ways, that's not a great conversation. It might be a great transcript, but like if you were in that conversation, you'd be like, this is the most boring thing on earth. Like everyone's just waiting to hit the tennis ball. Mm-hmm. A good conversation is kind of messy and it has these non-linear aspects. And that's important. That's how we connect with each other.
What's the third skill?
Okay, so there's 2 more. The third skill is that you need to understand vulnerability and the role of vulnerability in a conversation. Because most people misunderstand what vulnerability is. This word has gotten used so much, we tend to think it means like, crying on someone's shoulder or talking about like when your mom was mean to you. That's not what vulnerability is. Vulnerability has a very, very specific definition in neuroscience and psychology. And it's something that our brains have evolved to do, which is that when I tell you something that you could judge, it creates a sense of vulnerability in me. Now, I might tell you something where I don't care about your judgment. I might tell you that I like Star Trek better than Star Wars. I think it's a better show, better plots, better acting. And you could be like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like the Star Wars is definitely better than Star Trek. I don't care. I don't care if you agree with me. It's not like it's a high stakes thing. But the act of me telling you something that you could judge, it sets off a neural cascade in my brain that creates a sense of vulnerability. And here's what we know. is that when I do that, if you don't judge me, if you choose to withhold judgment, and even more powerfully, if you share something about yourself that I could judge, then it is impossible for us not to trust and like each other a little bit more. Our brains literally have evolved to use vulnerability as a signal as to whether we should trust other people. And that doesn't mean that like I might agree with you. It doesn't mean that I might like think you'd be a good friend. But as once I am vulnerable with you and you are vulnerable with me, once we engage in reciprocal vulnerability and reciprocal authenticity, we will trust each other and like each other a little bit more.